I think if you do the right things right, the money follows. I never tried to drive things with about the money first, that your role is to increase our profits. That, yes, that's part of all our responsibility. But I always believe that the primary role of everybody in the organization was to create a place where we served each other well and we served those human beings we call customers well. Whatever that meant, different drinks, better, cleaner floors, and all of that went back to that. And if we did that, then the money would fall. And it's proven to be factual. Starbucks was not my first rodeo. I saw where it worked and where it didn't work. When you didn't treat people well, how it destroyed the organization. I also saw where you treated people well and the organization didn't do so well. It's not a guarantee of success, but it's a guarantee of fulfillment. It's a guarantee that you'll live your values and you'll be able to look at yourself in the mirror and you'll be able to say, I did okay.
Welcome to the Show Your Value podcast, where we explore the art of value creation in three macro buckets: material value creation, emotional energy value creation, and spiritual value creation. I am your host, Lee Benson, and today my very special guest is Howard Behar. He is the retired president of Starbucks Coffee Company North America and Starbucks Coffee International. Howard is the ultimate servant leader who is known for such memorable lessons as the person who sweeps the floor should choose the broom, and only the truth sounds like the truth. And during his 21-year tenure at Starbucks, he was part of a core leadership team that grew it from only 28 stores to over 15,000 stores spanning 5 continents. Howard is committed to the development and education of our future leaders and has been a longtime advocate of the servant leadership model. After the successful publication of his first book, It's Not About the Coffee: Lessons on Leadership from a Life at Starbucks, Howard now travels the world speaking to leaders, corporations, students, and his motivational message inspires everyone to be servant leaders and to lead with their values first. Howard, it's such a pleasure and an honor to have you here today. Thank you.
Oh, Lee, thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, and getting ready for this discussion in the last week, I read your first book, It's Not About the Coffee. I also read The Magic Cup, which is more of sort of a fable to get the values message across. And I remember in my career, I'm on my 7th company. I've started from scratch. I'm a long way from being done. I really love this. But I discovered that the emotional energy and the spiritual side, and in the context of business, spiritual to me is connectedness, how we care about the team members and all of that. Once I realized that decades ago, everything got better on the money side as well. How did you discover the importance of this? Because values really come out in both of your books. I just loved them.
Well, all of our lives, we learn lessons. Sometimes we don't realize we're learning them, but we learn lessons. And what really got me going was when I was kind of early in my career. I was in my mid-20s, and I struggled with the CEO of a company that I was at, and he wanted me to be something different than what I was. And that struggle forced me to start really thinking about who was Howard? What did I really stand for, and what really mattered to me? And that put me on a journey of writing down my values, about deciding how I wanted to live my life, what my mission was. And it took me a long time to do that work. It actually over a year by the time I got it really completed. And then I have tried to live by those values the rest of my life. Hardly anything has changed. That's in almost 50 years. The values that I started with are pretty much exactly the same as where I'm at today, and I'm 79 years old.
Yeah, that's incredible. And in your first book, It's Not About the Coffee, the first 2 values that you go through, one is know who you are, which is what you're talking about, but also know why you're here.
Right.
And that seems so foundational to everything that we do. What's your advice for our listeners on how they should approach coming up with these things?
Well, the first thing is to write down your values. They have to be written down, and then you have to define what they mean to you. Because of that, if I said honesty, I want to be an honest person. It's actually my first core value. What does that mean to me? how does it come to life? Because it's just a word until you define it and you say, what does honesty mean to me? What would I tell a white lie about? What wouldn't I lie about? And so you have to come to grips with those things. And then you got to, I feel, and I learned that I had to have a personal mission statement. Now that has changed over time. Uh, Early on in my career, it was kind of, I, it was, I wouldn't call that it was soulful. It was something I wanted it to be, which was, I want to be one of the leading people in the home furnishings industry. But after when I joined Starbucks, and Starbucks did its work on its values and its mission, I kind of attached myself to that, and I completely changed my mission. And my mission today is every day I want to nurture and inspire the human spirit, beginning with myself first and then for others. And the reason why I say self first is what I've learned in life after living this long. If you're not okay with you, it's very difficult to help somebody else. So I think those are the first two things that you do is figuring out what your core values are, define them, and then write a personal mission statement. And that mission statement, that defines how I live my life every day. And then how I do it is according to my core values and what I call my 6Ps. But it drives me. I look at it every day. I'm looking at it right now. It's right here on my office wall. You'd say, well, Howard, why do you need to look at it all the time? Because it's so easy to forget. It's amazing how easy it is for us to get off track as human beings. And so I'm always looking at it, making sure that I'm doing what I set out to do.
That's great. And I reflect on my alignment tools every week and have sort of deep conversations with myself about what it means to cultivate in that direction. And I remember back in the late 90s, I had a set of values. It was an aerospace company that I was building. And the top value was integrity. And I asked 10 of our, at the time, only 70 employees, how are you applying integrity to make the company measurably better? And I got 10 crazy answers. Kind of to your point, it's just a word until you figure out a way to sink your teeth into it. So we figured that out. And, every year, every employee had an example for each one of we changed them to behaviors.
Yeah.
But for each value or behavior of how they applied it to make us measurably better. And wow, did things take off. So if you could talk about how getting values right inside an organization can supercharge the financial performance, the growth, and all of that, because that's what I found. And it seems like in your book, that's a big part of what you found.
Well, I think the most important thing to have in any organization is alignment. Not everybody the same on everything, but alignment against how you want to live your life inside of work, how you want to treat each other, how you want to treat the people that we serve, those human beings we call customers, how we want to do things that we do. And that alignment really drives an organization because everybody knows where the other person is at and how they will do things. And that to me is key. I mean, it was one of the great strengths of Starbucks is we had tremendous alignment on what we were about. And I coined this phrase that we weren't in the coffee business serving people, but we were in the people business serving coffee. And I was trying to get everybody to understand why we were all here. And it was about people, about serving other human beings. And that was our role. That was our responsibility, is to make sure we served other people well, the people that worked in the organization and the people that we call our customers. But that alignment enabled us to do things that other companies just couldn't do. Because if you're out of alignment, if you got different people going different ways all the time, right? It destroys the company. It just like it destroys a family. You got a family and your family is out of alignment, right? What does it do? It destroys a family because what happens? Trust breaks down. And the grease of life is trust, whether it's in an organization or it's in a family.
Yeah. So what I'm sort of fascinated to learn here is how did you get culture right at scale? So we've got 28 stores. That's one thing, which is almost impossible for most to get right. And then you grow to 15,000. How did you keep culture and how did you drive it at scale?
Well, number one, you have to continually repeat the message. Leaders get bored with the message long before people get bored hearing it. And you have to be focused on it. So, I focused on the people and the coffee. The coffee was kind of where it's like where your music. It's where a lot of our creativity came out, the drinks we made and all the things we did. But the people were the driving force and how we treated each other. And so that meant that we had to be consistent in how we treated each other. It meant that leadership had to live up to the words it spoke. You can't, say one thing and do another. And so those things are the things that really make a difference. And I was relentless about it. And so were the other leaders in the organization. And whenever we got somebody that was out of sync, no matter what level you were at the company, we would do everything we could to get those people back on board and understanding why we were here and then practicing it. And if they couldn't, then they couldn't be there. It didn't mean they were bad people. It just meant that they just didn't fit within Starbucks. And so you had to be relentless about it. There's no end. I mean, it's the examples that I have, I have 2 children and I have 6 grandchildren. And I'm always telling them, look, most important thing in your life is to be, number one, honest with yourself and then honest with others. And because when you live your life that way, you don't have to second guess yourself. You're not second guessing others. You know who you are and you're living according to that value. And that's the same at work. It's the same work, but I had to repeat it over and over and over again. And I had to practice it, right? If I didn't live like I said, then nobody's going to believe it. My kids wouldn't believe it. My grandkids wouldn't believe it. People at work wouldn't believe it. And so I was relentless about it, and I held myself accountable for it. And, you have to evaluate yourself. I go home every night, when I was working, I'd look in the mirror and say, Howard, how did you do today? And how did you do today was against my core values and my mission statement and my 6 P's. And then I had to say, on some days I didn't do so well. Nobody lives a perfect life. I'm an emotional guy. My emotions would get carried away sometimes, and I had to come back and own it. And people could always depend that I would. If I didn't own it myself, I was always open to hearing it from somebody else.
Yeah. I work with a lot of different companies, just the nature of my business and what I'm doing today. And I see beautiful wallpaper with a mission and vision and values on it. And it's nothing more most of the time than expensive wallpaper. And what I'm observing is that if the senior leadership team doesn't live those alignment tools, it's worse culturally than not having them at all.
Yeah, you better not have anything.
Yeah, it'd be better not to even have it. And when I think about Starbucks, just the nature of it and the type of employees, that you're probably going to have, really high turnover. Most businesses like that do. So what did you do in the onboarding process to start them out right out of the gate, sort of infusing these values?
Well, number one, who you recruit and hire is critical. And I always said, focus on the people skills first, on who they were as human beings, and then on their work skills. We can teach work skills. We can teach how to make a drink. We can teach all those things. It's much harder to teach values. It's much more difficult to get people to align with that because we all come with our own baggage. And, that baggage doesn't always fit within the organization that people are joining. And so number one is who you recruit and who you hire. And then once you bring people in, the key was getting them to understand what we were trying to do. And so we look for ways of doing that. And it wasn't just, you're right. It just wallpaper on the walls didn't work. We had this little green handbook that had basically, it espoused how we did things at Starbucks. And we gave one to everybody, and then we would constantly be talking about it. We had open forums where we invited everybody into the open forum, and we would talk about those values. And leadership had to open itself up to when we weren't living those values. We had a program called Mission Review. In every paycheck, there was a card that anybody could fill out and send in, and they could question whether we had been living up to what we said our mission or our values were. and we had to get back to them within 72 hours if they put their name down. So number one was holding ourselves accountable as leaders, and then holding our people responsible and accountable for how they acted. And it was difficult to get fired at Starbucks for missing your numbers, almost impossible. But if you messed with the people or you treated somebody wrong or badly, that was a quick way to get coaching and out the door, because that's what mattered to us, and that continued to matter to us. And were we perfect? No, no, not at all. When you have a company of 500,000 people spread out in 90 countries around the world, you're not going to be perfect all the time, and you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to do things that you're not proud of. The key is how do you recover? The key is how do you own it, and how do you find out about it?
Yeah, well, our best is going to change every day because we're not perfect. But what I love about what you're saying is that directionally, this is where we're going, and even when we misstep, it brings us back to alignment to go that way. And had you not gotten this part of it right, would the growth that you experienced at Starbucks would have even happened?
No, no, it would not. We could never have done what we did without that. And that was the driving force, the idea that it was people that mattered at Starbucks. And we would never have got it done. And that led us to all the things that we did, the kind of programs we offered our people, college degrees, healthcare to part-time workers. Nobody was doing that. Everybody got equity in the company. I mean, it was on and on and on. Same-sex partner benefits, which, for some people they may disagree, but for us that was important. And, we just lived our values, and we said, what do we do to make life better for our people? And did we always do it? No, we made mistakes, and, but that was part of the journey.
Yeah, I actually think for any small business, just kind of putting your head in the franchise space is a good idea. Getting all the systems and processes and values, other alignment tools to a place where if we wanted to and we had the funding, we could just replicate what we're doing in another market.
Yeah.
In another market, I think it's such a great mindset to be in as a foundation for growth, even if you don't want to franchise. But how did you think about that? Because you really got that right. Oh my gosh.
Well, we didn't franchise. We were almost all company-owned stores. The only time we didn't own the store was where we couldn't get the real estate, airports, grocery stores, things like that. But even with those, we said, this is who we are. You have to live to Starbucks values, how we treat the people we serve and people within the organization, because that all comes out in how you do things. So when you come into Starbucks, the best experience is if you have a Starbucks you go to all the time, they know your name, they know your drink. Or if they don't know your name, they acknowledge you as if they know you. And those things matter. There are very human skills that we were trying to get across, and we just stayed with it. And it worked. We would never have been the kind of company we become without that at all. It was, because making a latte, anybody can make a latte. There's no magic to it. Anybody can roast coffee, maybe not the same way Starbucks would roast it, but anybody can roast coffee. But at the end of the day, not everybody seems to be able to deal with the people things. Some leaders think they're there to be served. We always said that leaders are there to serve.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's for me very admirable about all of this, whether it's wholly owned or franchise, but you're replicating experience at scale in so many different locations. It's such an easy thing to say, but almost impossible to do. Very few actually do it. What would your advice be for those that want to scale like that? I mean, what are some core things to be thinking about? The values are a big part of it. Anything around systems or?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
We had, the interesting thing about Starbucks is that, we make a drink the way you want it. So we had recipes, not rules. We had a recipe for a latte, but if you wanted a latte made differently, we would make it the way you wanted it. But on the other hand, how we treated each other, those were sacrosanct. They were that would matter. We treated each other with kindness, with gentleness, with love in our hearts for the people that we worked with and the people that we served. And I don't care. I had responsibility for taking Starbucks outside of North America. So the first market we opened in was Japan. Well, Japan has a different culture, but just because it has a different culture doesn't mean that Starbucks values don't come into play and they had to be the same values. And that's what we took to Starbucks. We had a joint venture partner, but the most important thing about that partner is that they subscribed to our values. These weren't things that were in conflict with the culture, but these were things that the culture could absorb. And, one thing we have always had at Starbucks is lots of female leaders, women in leadership, senior leadership positions. In Japan, when we first opened there, it wasn't traditional in Japan to have women in leadership positions. But I was on the board of that organization. I kept pushing. Eventually, we had two women at different times that were led the Starbucks Japan. And things that were kind of unheard of. But those were our values. And we weren't going to, if we couldn't operate according to what Starbucks stood for, then we weren't going to be there. Or we weren't going to have that group as a partner. And we had to change a few along the way.
Were there any commonalities across cultures in all the different places that you went that you could use as sort of a foundational anchor?
Yeah, absolutely. Here's what I have to do. I had never done that kind of work before. I had never operated a business on an broad international scale. Here's what I found out. We're pretty much all the same. Everybody wants to love and be loved. Everybody wants to grow as a human being. Everybody wants to have more for themselves, for their families. Everybody wants to be treated with respect and dignity. And everything else is just commentary. With the food we eat, the religions we practice, the color of our skin, those are just things. But they're not the core of what human beings are about. And it didn't make any difference whether we were in Japan, whether we were in China, whether we were in Saudi Arabia, whether we were in South Africa. Didn't make any difference. We were Starbucks. And the people that worked in those stores could depend that we would live our way. And there were times, because we were doing things through joint venture partners around the world, where we made a mistake and our partners weren't the right people. And sometimes it took us a long time to get them out because you had an agreement. It was difficult to figure, but we were relentless about it. And we had it happen in one country, I won't mention the name, but where we had a joint venture partner and the thing was struggling. We couldn't figure out why until we finally spent enough time there realizing that the joint venture partner didn't live our values. And we finally forced that company out, and we took it over ourselves. We doubled the business in a year. We didn't do anything different. Same number of stores, everything. All we did was starting treating people with respect and dignity. I mean, really, that was what it was. It sounds crazy. So if you're somebody that wants to expand your business, and let's say you're in retail somewhere, or it doesn't make any difference what business you're in, you want to go to another city with your product or your service, then you have to start with who you are. You have to, and that has to be the driving force. Anybody you hire in that market or anybody you send there has to be absolutely true believers, and they must practice your values and your mission. There's no room for anything else.
That's such a big takeaway from this part of the discussion, that if you're going to form a partnership, don't just look at the potential financial return. Have some sort of an audit checklist to make sure they culturally align with you, or it could be a complete disaster. It's almost worse than getting married and divorced because of all the sort of interconnections that have to be unwound.
It's hard. And I made the mistakes. I did a couple of agreements with, the guy that was the chairman of Sony. He said, before you do any agreement or any deal, take it and crunch it up and swallow it. If it doesn't give you indigestion, go ahead. And I did that, and I had a little indigestion, and I ignored my indigestion.
Yeah. Any advice for putting together an audit checklist, or to figure that out?
Yeah. What matters to you most? Starbucks was so people centric, that had to be the driving force. So everything mattered there, and that's what we would check. We would check. They had businesses that they're running, and we would audit their business and see how they treated their people. And the only mistakes we made is when we didn't get that right. But yeah, you start with what matters to you. Maybe it's technical skills. I don't know. Maybe it's detail. I think everything begins and ends with people. So I'm a true believer there. I think I don't care what you do in life. It's always about serving others. Whether you're building parts for jet engines, or whether you're a doctor or a lawyer, or whether you're a group of architects, or it all begins with what matters with your people. Because if your people aren't aligned, then they don't care usually. They're about themselves. Look what just happened with Boeing. You know, how somebody that wasn't paying attention, right? Why weren't they paying attention? I don't know the answer to that, but I have a good hunch because profits became more important at Boeing and stock price than their engineering. And I remember when they moved from Seattle and all of a sudden they didn't have engineers running the business, and it totally changed the business.
Yeah. I completely agree. So culturally, it went from safety, engineering, best products on the planet and the space to return. And I can see the pull and allure of doing that, but we can't forget what got us here. And it's so important with Boeing and other aerospace companies. People's lives depend on that.
And you look what's happened to them. They have had one disaster after another.
Yeah, how does a door just fall off? How did we miss that, right? Or no redundancy on attitude of the aircraft and have the computer take over. Nobody would have designed a system that way. Well, let's hope they get their act together and learn from this and make it more of an engineering run or led organization.
So I hold the board really responsible, and it's not just the leadership inside the company. I hold the board responsible because they're the ones that are giving the messages out that what matters here.
Yeah. Do you find that most boards are doing their job or most of them aren't doing their job? I find most don't.
No, don't. I always have. I've been on maybe 7 or 8 public boards in my life, and I always believe that you had to involve yourself in the business. Now, a lot of leaders don't like that. They don't like you asking questions, or they don't like you going out and making a trip with one of the people in the field. I always believed I had to do that. I was on the board of the Gap for 8 years, and I used to go unload trucks in the middle of the night at a Gap store. Not because I didn't know how to unload a truck, and I was, it's hard to do that work, and I was older, but I wanted to know what the people thought. What did they talk about when they were unloading that truck? What mattered to them? And I'd ask questions. That's how I got to Starbucks. Before I'd met Howard Schultz, who was kind of the modern day founder of Starbucks, and about a year before I joined Starbucks, I was trying to buy my own business, a small business, but anyway, I ended up getting back with Howard, and I said, Howard, before either one of us makes a decision, can I work in the company for a week? I want to work for free for a week. You don't pay me. You won't even show me on the payroll. Won't show anything. I'd like to work on the trucks for a couple of days. I want to work on the roasting plant for a few days, and I want to work in the stores for a few days. And during that time, I got to see firsthand what was really going on. And I came out of that experience thinking that this is not a coffee business. This is a people business. And it took me a long time to convince the people in the organization that was true. And once we did, it was amazing what happened.
Yeah. Well, in a lot of ways, aren't all businesses people businesses first?
Everything.
Different ways.
Everything. We're all put on this earth to serve other human beings. Whether you're a widget maker that makes a widget, goes into a printing press, that gets sold to a publishing company that produces a magazine or newspaper that gets delivered to somebody's home to inform or entertain them. The widget maker has to align with that greater purpose of serving somebody. And there's lots of that are more direct than that you can really identify how you help somebody have a better life, how you serve them.
Yeah, just creating jobs so families can support themselves. And the vendors we deal with, whether you're making jet engines or anything, it's all in that camp. Yeah. One of my businesses was aerospace related. It was aftermarket repair and overhaul and manufacturing. And we were doing business in 60 countries, and I went to probably half of them as we were building the business. And I found what you found. Everybody wants to be healthy and happy and support their families, have a good job, be safe and secure, etc. Um, and so, yeah, I think there are commonalities that span the globe, and a lot of folks would argue that there really aren't. But it sounds like you found that there are.
Oh, there are more than the differences.
Yeah, that's so interesting. We should hold on to that, going forward. Something you said earlier about, well, we don't compromise on how we interact with each other, how we behave and treat each other. But if a customer wants a drink their way, we're going to do that. And one of the things that I see is that, and I'm just thinking small, mid-sized businesses, and probably a lot of large businesses now that I think about it, they love their stuff way more than their customers do, and they don't really listen, and it drives me nuts. And they wonder why they're not growing and why the world isn't reacting the way they want them to. You had an amazing focus group, tens of millions of customers globally. How did you connect that feedback to making really good decisions that you would drive out at scale? I mean, like one little mistake at the top driving it at scale could blow all kinds of. How did you think about that?
Well, I believe that leaders have to be number one skill they have. Number one skill is empathy, but they have to be curious, and they have to be willing to ask questions. I was not the creative genius at Starbucks. I'm an alchemist, and I was constantly asking questions. Not only questions about who the people were that were working, but I had three questions I would ask everybody that I met at Starbucks. What do you like about Starbucks? What don't you like about Starbucks? What would you change about Starbucks? And, it was amazing what you learn. I mean, Frappuccino, which is now a $4 billion business, came out of asking a question and getting input from one of our district managers and listening to that input. It wasn't my idea. I just knocked down the hurdles to get it going, and I broke a few rules or to do it. But I don't. I'm a guy that doesn't like many rules. Here are my rules: don't do anything illegal, don't do anything immoral, don't do anything unethical, and don't poison anybody. If you can live within those four rules, we can try things.
Yeah, what I got out of it's not about the coffee is that when you did that, there was a big force in the organization saying we don't do that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but that's what the customers wanted. So how did you get through that in a way that, well, obviously you did, but what did you
I had
learn
to
from the
break a
story?
rule. I had to go against somebody, a guy that headed up product development and marketing in the company. And I snuck it in, and I could have been fired over it, but I thought it was the right thing to do. And we weren't going to poison anybody. We made sure of that, and we tried it. And I believe that you always got to be willing to bet your job. You got to be willing to bet your job. And I'm not pleading for anarchy here. That's not my point. Everybody can't be doing everything all the time, but when you're in a leadership position, that means that you got to be willing to take some chances, and you got to lead. And I just did that, and I did that a lot. And fortunately, Howard Schultz, gave me lots of room and to try things. I mean, the semi-automated espresso machines, we were having carpal tunnel syndrome in our people because young people, they were, as they're turning what they call the group in the machine, would bend their wrists. And so I said, we got to find another way. So we looked for a piece of equipment, and a lot of people didn't want it at Starbucks, and we put it in Japan because I knew nobody would see it there. So we could experiment with it and see. The first drive-through that we opened, that Howard Schultz was dead against drive-throughs. He didn't want anything to do with drive-throughs. And there was a group of us that felt that it was a way forward because of the nature of our business. So we snuck one in Vancouver, Washington, an old Arthur Treacher's Fish and Chips that we converted. That was the first drive-through, almost doubled the volume in a typical store. So you got to be willing to bet your job. And I'm not talking about things that are dangerous. I'm not things that we're talking about betting the company kind of risks. I'm talking about things that kind of make sense, and you're willing to try it and to do some things, and you kind of bend it a little bit. It's how things move forward. And I didn't do it on my, I didn't, it was, again, not one of those things was my idea. Yeah, I listened to our people, and they're saying this is what people are asking for. This is what they want. They want, when we first opened stores, we had 5 little bar stools in the window. And our store manager saying people want a place to sit down. Well, there was huge pushback against it in the company because the real estate development people said we're going to have to get different permitting. And I said, so we have to get different permitting. It took us a while to work through it, but we started putting chairs in. Well, people loved it. We started putting some fireplaces and making it more like a living room and doing different things, all against the grain of the organization. But it's what you were talking about, not listening to the people that you're serving, and so you're not doing the thing. So I encourage everybody to be an alchemist. You don't have to have the idea. Sometimes leaders think that they need to have the idea. It has to be their idea because that's what they get paid for. No, you get paid for listening.
Yeah, I think it's the leader's job to connect dots in an ever better way over time to create value faster. And you're talking about 2 focus groups here that most completely miss. You've got your customers. Why aren't we paying more attention to them and really listening and connecting better dots to serve them better? But then you've got all of your team members. And what an amazing focus group there. And you don't want to you can't do everything that you want, they want you to do. However, the best leaders connect dots in a way that do the right things at the right time in the right order and better over time. Talk about that a little bit.
And the best leaders get back to those people. If there's something that they've said and you say, well, we hear you, but we don't think it's appropriate at this time, but we'll put it on the board and we'll come back and look at it later. Thank you for contributing, because it's a contribution even if we don't do it.
Yeah, and celebrate failure. So talk about that. A lot of leaders say that, and then when it happens, they react in a way that nobody ever wants to fail again. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I work with a guy like that. If there was a mistake made, he was around the building looking for who made that mistake. If a mistake is made, just go look in the mirror. That's the best place to go look because you own it. Your people own the good stuff. You own the bad stuff.
Yeah. A gotcha leadership approach is going to make for a horrible culture, for the team members.
Yeah, remember, the 1 Minute Manager, the book, The 1 Minute Manager by Ken Blanchard.
Tim Blanchard. Yeah.
It was so good. I've never forgot. Catch people doing the right things right. That's what you want to do. You don't want to catch them doing things wrong. You do that, but you're not trying to catch them. You're trying to help them be better. But catch them doing the right things right. And what do they want to repeat? That.
Yeah. I think back when I was in high school, I was actually kicked out of the house at the beginning of my senior year. So I supported myself as a cook at a Coco's restaurant. And there was a manager back then, a guy named Jim Fletcher. I'll never forget him, just the way he talked to me. And I could tell he was interested in where I was going and wanted to stay in touch. What is it about leaders that touch employees that way? Because a lot of them are really good at doing their jobs and what do you need? I'll get you what you need. But there's some magic there and how they pay attention and really actually care, not just say they care. And you talk about that in the first book.
You care like you really mean it. And that means that it's time or money or emotion, whatever it is that you've got to spend, you do that with your people. So many people say they care, but they don't, because they're unwilling to give anything of themselves. And, whenever I hear leaders say, well, our people are our most important asset, I know they don't get it because people are not assets. You own assets. Trucks are assets. Computers are assets. Human beings never give you quite what you expect. When you put the key into the truck and you turn it on, most of the time it's going to start. And you're going to use it. But when somebody comes to work in the morning and you can tell that something's up, pay attention. How you doing today? How are you feeling? And then listen. Because, Everybody said, leaders say, don't bring your personal stuff to work. Baloney. Everybody brings their personal stuff to work. Leaders bring their personal stuff to work. Leaders went, like I used to say, yeah, if I was having a problem or my wife yelled at me in the morning and I was kind of upset, I could close the door to my office, turn the shades down, close my eyes for 15 minutes. A barista doesn't get to do that.
Yeah, I don't work with a whole team of robots either. I mean,
Yeah.
everything's personal every day for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. And the key to great leadership is recognizing that and responding to that.
Yeah. Well, in your book, you talk about listen for the truth, and it's not what people are saying. It's not even a lot of times what the numbers are showing, because there could be this building disaster coming. What's your advice for leaders to cultivate that capability to listen for the truth and what's really going on? Because I don't think we get 100% of the truth, probably any percentage of the time.
No, we don't. But you have to keep pushing for it. And the only way that you ever get it really good is that you build incredible trust. You never burn somebody for something they told you, right? Ever. The minute you do it, your trust is gone. They will never forget. And so it's being trustworthy yourself, right? Listening not only with your ears, but listening with your eyes and listening with those little antennae that we have in our heads that we can't see, but they're there. It's listening with our whole being. And that is really critical, I think. And most of us don't do that. There's that old saying, listen for not what's not being said. And that you have to pull sometimes. I remember the very first meeting I had at Starbucks. So we had like 3 district managers and we had like 28 store managers. I brought everybody in, and it was a day-long session. And I started with my 3 questions. What do you like about Starbucks? What don't you like about Starbucks? What would you change about Starbucks? And we started listing everything up and down, from products to how we treat each other, everything. I wanted everything out. And it was hard. People didn't want to say anything because there was a lot of fear. Because the leader that was there before me created fear, and so they didn't know if they could trust me or not. After that meeting, I remember the guy's name like yesterday. His name was Peter Gunby. He was a store manager in Seattle, one of our stores, and he came up to me, and Peter was kind of quiet the whole meeting, and I kept trying to pull out of him. I was trying to get from everybody. If somebody wouldn't speak up, I'd actually ask him a question. Peter said, if I had known that you really wanted us to talk, I had some things I want to say. Well, Peter, one thing you can always depend on me. I say what I mean, and I mean what I say. So if you got something to say, I'd like to hear it. And next time when we're in a meeting, you can trust me. And so it was those kinds of things. And so I built trust over a long, protracted period of time. Did I screw it up now and then? Yeah, I did. I had a little temper, once in a while, and it would come out, and I had to own it, and wasn't always pleasant, but I did, and I worked my way through it. And fortunately, I kept putting rocks on that good side of the scale, and there was very few on that other side. And so people would forgive me, and I would self-correct, and I would own it.
Yeah, well, best net effect going forward. We're here to create value. One of the questions I love asking team members is, how do you create value for this organization? And most of the time, at best, I get a job description.
Yeah.
Instead of, we're here as a team to create value this way, here's how we know we're doing it. This is the best work I'm doing to contribute to it. How do you think about that? Like, how did you get, I love getting everybody sort of in this mode of, you're the CEO of your own role. You're running a business within a business. Even if you're not a leader, you're still a leader in this individual contributor
role.
A
leader of yourself.
Yeah. Talk about that, because you did that at Starbucks.
Yeah. Well, you have to give room for people to do that. That means that in order to be a leader of themselves, they have to have the ability to make some decisions. It's where my saying, the person who sweeps the floor should choose the broom, came from. People get to vote. We go out and we hire people. We spend a lot of money recruiting, and we bring them in, and then we give them the handbook. And in the handbook are all the rules and regulations of what, if you do any of these things, you're going to get fired. Absolutely the wrong thing to do. So, it's you bring great people in. You talk to them about what the organization is about. I'm sure you've done it before, but you repeat it. What we are hoping that they will bring to this organization, and how we expect them to do things here, and what really counts here, and what matters here. And let's say that we hired Jim to sweep floors. So we say, hey Jim, we have 5 brooms that you can choose from. We have a right-handed broom, a left-handed broom, we have a straw broom, we have a plastic broom, we have a push broom. Pick any one you like. And if you don't like the one you pick, go ahead and pick another one. Well, 2 weeks pass and you get together with Jim again and you say, Jim, how you doing? And Jim has got a smile on his face as wide as a Cheshire cat. And you say, hey, what's going on, Jim? And how's the job going? And he says, Howard, I think I have found a way to increase floor sweeping productivity by 10%. And, oh, really? And he said, I found a broom on the internet that I'd like to try. You know how many leaders would just roll their eyes and say, just use the broom I gave you? Right? You know how many purchasing department says, I'm sorry, but we only have these 5 brooms. I don't care if a 6th one's going to do something better. But why did you hire the person to begin with? Why do you give them responsibility to sweep the floor? Who knows more about how to sweep a floor and what kind of tools you need than the person that's doing the job? And that's across the organization. Who knows more about putting a bolt in than the person who's putting the bolt in?
Yeah.
Right? Nobody.
Well, I went right to, if I could save 10% of the time on this particular activity across 15,000 plus stores.
Yeah.
Well, that's huge.
It's huge. It's huge. But I was not, I think if you do the right things right, the money follows, performance follows. I never tried to drive things with about the money first, that your role is to increase our profits. That, yes, that's part of all our responsibility. But I always believe that the primary role of everybody in the organization was to create a place that where we served each other well and we served those human beings we call customers well. Whatever that meant, different drinks, better, cleaner floors, and all of that went back to that. And if we did that, then the money followed. And it's proven to be factual. And this is not my first, Starbucks was not my first rodeo. I saw where it worked and where it didn't work. Where when you didn't treat people well, how it destroyed the organization. I also saw where you treated people well and the organization didn't do so well. It's not a guarantee of success, but it's a guarantee of fulfillment. It's a guarantee that you'll live your values and you'll be able to look at yourself in the mirror and you'll be able to say, I did okay.
Yeah. Most would say when you ask the question, what's the scarcest commodity on a planet? And they'll say time. I actually think it's positive emotional energy because I'd rather only live half as long if I'm on 9 or 10 as opposed to 1 or 2.
Yeah, exactly.
Because everything's different. And I think that is the X factor for leaders. It's the emotional energy and how they show up and how it infuses into the rest of the team. If you can, talk about that a little bit, because I think a lot of leaders completely miss how powerful that is.
Well, there's a couple of words that, maybe get overused, but vulnerability is one. That's being a true self. If something is wrong, if you screwed up, own it and own it in front of everybody. If you're down, if you're struggling with something, tell them you're struggling with something and ask for their help. The second word is authenticity, is being your true self. You show up as you say you are all the time. Sometimes it happens, we make a mistake, but 99% of the time you show up the way you are. And then kindness and caring, is helping people solve the issues that they have. I think that 3 keys to servant leadership are these. Is you help your people grow. Number 1 is human beings. Number 2, you help your people grow as professionals. Number 3, you help your people achieve their personal goals in life. When you do those 3 things well, and you do it in a kind and caring way and supportive way, then they want to perform. They will do anything to help the organization and to help you. When you don't do those things, they find all sorts of ways to make something not work. They may not do it consciously, but they do. They don't show up. They don't, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, and it makes so much sense the way you talk about flipping the org chart to where
Yeah,
the CEO's at the bottom and everything's supportive all the way out to the customers
yeah,
going in there.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. I mean, look look, it's just like a family. Do you have children?
I do not. I do
Okay,
not.
I have two children and I have six grandchildren. I know what makes a difference in our family.
Hmm.
My job is to help my kids be all they can be, not criticize them. If I see something that I think they might want to think about, I talk about it. But normally I ask permission. I say, "There's something I'd like to talk to you about. Is it okay?" And sometimes they're willing to listen, and sometimes they say, "How about not now?" But I want to support them to be all they can be. To be better. Number one, to be a better human being. And what does that mean to me? It's simple things like picking up a piece of paper off the street. I got a great story to tell you. So I have this habit. It's I want to nurture and inspire the human spirit. Well, one of the things that I believe leads to that is doing little things in life. So when I'm walking down the street, I say hello to people. If I get on an elevator, I say hello to people, and I say, "How you doing?" I don't know them, but I say something. But another little habit I have is I pick up pieces of garbage off the street and I put them in the waste can. And I try to make a habit of doing that every day. Fortunately, I lived in Seattle, and there was an endless supply of inventory, so I never had to worry about whether it was something for me to pick up. But yeah, fortunately or unfortunately, but it's supporting those things, right? That just makes a difference. It's showing up. It's helping your people be all you can be. So my granddaughter was 4 years old. One of my granddaughters was 4 years old, and we were in the neighborhood. We were going down to get an ice cream cone, and I started picking up little pieces of paper off the street. Before I know it, I turn around. Here was my granddaughter. Honest to God, she had picked up all this stuff and she was holding it like this. She couldn't put any more in her arms. And I started to laugh. I'm thinking, there it is, right there, you know, and right. And that's how you do it. That's how you do it in a business. It's how you do it in a family.
Hmm. Well, I see you as someone that elevates emotional energy in every room that you go in. Since I look at it as the scarcest commodity, I love that you're doing that in the world, like everywhere, just saying hello and brightening somebody's day that,
Yeah, it matters. It's the little things that matter. Here's another story that may be of interest to you, uh, listeners. So we had a store in Santa Monica, and it was across the street from a nursing home. And we had a guy that came in. His name was Jim. They called him Big Jim because he was a big guy. And he'd come into the store every day about 2 o'clock, and he'd order a drip coffee and a blueberry muffin. Well, sometimes we were out of a blueberry muffin, but the store got used to him coming in, and they would save a blueberry muffin. But every time they gave Jim the blueberry muffin or a cup of coffee, they would write a message on it. Sometimes it was funny, like he was a big Pittsburgh Steelers fan. Sometimes they'd say, "Hey Jim, the Steelers suck," or "Jim, we love you," or whatever the message was. Hundreds and thousands of messages, or hundreds of messages. And Jim would walk out. He'd have that bag with him or the cup with him, and one day, 2 o'clock arrives, no Jim. 3 o'clock arrives, no Jim. 4 o'clock arrives, still no Jim. So one of the baristas took a drip coffee and a blueberry muffin across the street to the nursing home, and they walked into the nursing home to the front desk, and they said, "Where is Jim today?" And the person at the front desk, a little tear came down her face. She said, "I don't know how to tell you this, but Jim passed away last night in his sleep." Well, the barista went back to the store and told everybody was sad because Jim wasn't a customer, right? He was a human being that they had a relationship. He cared about them and they cared about him. So a day later, one of Jim's children comes into the store and said, "Would it be possible if the people of the store came to Jim's funeral? We know how much he loved them, and we just think it would be something great if that could happen." And the store manager, without blinking, said, "Absolutely, we'll be there." Figured out how to replace the people in the store for that time, for the few hours, and they all showed up at the funeral home. They walked through door of the funeral home, and here in the funeral home were about 3 or 4 big round tables, like when you go to one of those big meals, that organizational meals, and there's 10 people sitting around these round tables. There were 3 round tables. On those round tables was every bag and every cup that one of the baristas had written a message on. Jim had saved every one of those things. Now, in life, we think it's the big things that matter, but it's not always the big things. Most of the times, it's the small things. And Jim so much connected with those people and was felt so good by those messages. It helped him feel loved and cared about, because even when they were joking with him, like the Steelers suck, he knew they loved him, and they did. And so that's why it's important. When you're walking down the street, don't have your head down, have your head up. You can say good morning when you walk down the street. You don't have to say it to everybody, but say it. You get on an elevator. I used to laugh at people who get on the elevator in the Starbucks office building, and people, they're just, they're like this. Their shoulders are in, and we're squeezed together. And they were just, down, their heads down, and not saying anything. And I'd get on the elevator, and I just look at everybody. I said, "So how's everybody feeling today? Did you have a good night last night or a bad night? Anybody get a traffic ticket this morning? Anybody upset about something?" I would talk. I'd make a joke, and I got known for that because I wanted to liven it up. I wanted people to be human.
Hmm. That's amazing. What a great reminder of the impact we can have on our customers' lives. With any company, anywhere, doing anything, and I may get another T-shirt made that says "Small things matter big."
Yeah,
right. And in people's lives, I love that story.
Yeah, it's just absolutely true. Sometimes you get opportunities to do big things, but 99% of the time it's just small things. Can you imagine if everybody started picking up pieces of paper in every city that they were, or a cup, and put it in the garbage? We'd have the cleanest, country in the world. That's all you got to bend over.
Absolutely. I mean, I actually do that myself. I mean, I think it's super important. I want places to be better than when I got there by the time I leave. And that's how I think about it in my head. And when I talk with my sister, her kids, all of her grandkids, these are the kind of things that we regularly talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Howard, as we wrap up here, any final thoughts on helping our listeners create more value in the world in their lives?
Yeah. I'm going to come back to where we started. Look, the key in having a fulfilling life is living it with intention. So what are your intentions? And your intentions are your values and how you live those values. Your intentions is your mission statement and how you live up to that mission statement. And you got to write it down. If you don't, you won't be committed to it. And otherwise, it's just wishes, hopes, and dreams. And so you got to commit. And then you got to live. Doesn't mean you're not going to make mistakes, but live your life with intention.
All right. Thank you. This has been a real treat for me. So I really appreciate your time today, Howard. Thank you.
Thanks, I appreciate the opportunity. So before we get off, I always like to give everybody my email address and my cell phone number. So my email address is hb@howardbehar.com, hb@howardbehar.com. And my cell phone number is 206-972-7776. I will take any call. I will respond to everybody. It may take me a little time because I'm slow. I'm 79 now. I'm not as fast as I used to be, but I will get back to everybody.
Well, thank you for that. That's incredible. If you ever get to Phoenix, I would love to get together and continue the conversation.
I'd love to do that. Yeah, I'd like to hear some of your music.
Yeah. Happy to share as much as you're willing to hang out and listen.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, so this has been the Show Your Value podcast. If you got some value out of today, please like this episode and leave a review if you have time. And until the next episode, please go forth and create value.